Jack Thompson stood on the edge of the old wooden porch, staring at the vast expanse of dry, sun-baked land that stretched before him. The wind whispered across the ranch, lifting small clouds of dust that danced over the cracked soil. This land had been alive once, full of lush green pastures, grazing cattle, and the sounds of life that came with a busy ranch. But now, it was quiet, too quiet, and Jack felt that quiet in his bones. It had been nearly 5 years since his wife Margaret had passed away. The grief had been a heavy, constant shadow. She had been the heart of the ranch, the one who could calm the skittish horses with just a soft word, who could coax a stubborn calf into the barn with patience and gentle laughter. Without her, Jack had tried to hold everything together, but the weight had been too much. The barns were sagging in places, the fences were worn and splintered, and the cattle were fewer each year. The fields, once golden with wheat, now struggled to grow even a modest harvest. Jack's shoulders sagged as he looked at it all. He had always prided himself on being a good rancher, a man who could work hard and care for the land, but lately he felt like he was failing. Inside the farmhouse, the kitchen smelled faintly of stale coffee and old wood. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, a sharp reminder of the passing hours. Jack poured himself a cup, the liquid dark and bitter, and took it outside again, seeking some small comfort in the fresh air. The house was quiet, too. His daughters, Emma and Sophie, had moved to the city for school and work, leaving Jack alone with his memories and the ranch that seemed to be slipping away from him. He missed them terribly, though they called whenever they could. Emma, the eldest at 22, had always been the practical one. She had a sharp mind and a determined spirit, traits she inherited from both her parents. Sophie, just 18, was softer, more sensitive, but also fiercely loyal to her family. They both loved the ranch and their father deeply, though they had their own lives to live. On weekends, they would come home to help, but the ranch needed more than weekend attention. Jack had tried to manage everything himself, but it was too much. The work never seemed to end, and some days it felt like the ranch itself was turning against him. That morning, Jack had planned to check the irrigation system, hoping the sprinklers might bring a bit of life back to the struggling fields. The sun was climbing higher, and the air was already warm, hinting at the heat that would settle over the land by noon. He walked past the empty barn, noticing the way the hinges creaked in protest, and the way the wood groaned under its own weight. A loose board clattered to the ground, and Jack bent down to pick it up, rubbing his hands together to keep them from trembling. Even the smallest task now felt monumental. Jack's thoughts drifted to the past, to the times when the ranch had been alive with energy. He could almost hear the sound of Margaret's laughter echoing through the fields, see the way she would run her hands over the backs of the horses as if speaking to them in a secret language. They had built this ranch together, poured their hearts into it, and now he felt like he was letting everything fall apart. He shook his head, trying to push the memories away. He knew he couldn't stay in the past. He had to keep moving forward, even if it felt impossible. By mid-morning, Jack had managed to fix a broken gate and check the water troughs, though it had taken him far longer than it should have. Sweat ran down his back, and his legs ached, but the work gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. He looked out over the fields again, noting the dry patches where grass had refused to grow and the areas where weeds had taken over. The land needed care, attention, and hope, but Jack wasn't sure he had any of those left to give. When the truck pulled into the driveway, Jack's heart lifted slightly. It was a rare sight these days. The familiar rumble of tires on gravel. Emma and Sophie hopped out, their faces bright with smiles that seemed almost too cheerful for the heavy mood of the ranch. Emma carried a small bag, while Sophie had a box tucked under her arm. They moved quickly toward him, and for the first time in weeks, Jack felt a flicker of warmth in his chest. "Hi, Dad," Emma said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and concern. "We thought we'd come out for the weekend and see how things are going." Jack managed a small smile. "Things are holding," he said, though he knew it was a polite lie. "You girls didn't have to come all this way." Sophie stepped closer and handed him the box she had been carrying. "We know, Dad. But we wanted to help. We're worried about you. And the ranch." Her eyes were earnest, full of love and worry. Jack felt a lump in his throat. He was proud of his daughters, proud that they cared so much, but he hated that he couldn't make things easier for them. They spent the morning walking through the ranch, checking the fences, inspecting the fields, and talking quietly about what needed to be done. Emma had ideas about improving the irrigation system, while Sophie suggested ways to care for the few remaining cattle. Jack listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes feeling overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work that lay ahead. Yet seeing his daughter's energy and determination reminded him of Margaret's spirit. Somehow it sparked a tiny flame of hope that he thought had long since died. After a long morning, they returned to the farmhouse. Jack made a pot of coffee, and the three of them sat at the kitchen table, planning the weekend ahead. Emma and Sophie were full of ideas, talking about repairs, planting schedules, and ways to make the ranch more sustainable. Jack found himself listening, occasionally offering advice, but mostly just appreciating the presence of his daughters. It was a rare feeling, a sense of connection and shared purpose that had been missing for so long. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Jack stepped back onto the porch and looked out over the ranch once more. The land was still struggling, the barn still creaked, and the fields were far from perfect. But for the first time in months, he felt a sense of possibility. With his daughters by his side, perhaps there was a way to bring the ranch back to life, to honor Margaret's memory, and to find a new path forward. That night, as they sat around the kitchen table eating a simple meal, Jack listened to Emma and Sophie laugh and share stories from their lives in the city. He realized that even though the ranch was far from thriving, the love and support of his daughters could be a powerful force. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it, not alone, but together with the two young women who had always been his greatest pride. And so the ranch waited silently under the starry sky, a quiet witness to the struggles and hopes of a family bound together by love, loss, and the land that had shaped their lives. Jack Thompson, once feeling defeated and alone, began to see a glimmer of hope on the horizon, a spark that promised that perhaps, just perhaps, the ranch could live again. The next morning, the ranch felt different. The air was filled with a quiet anticipation, as if even the land itself sensed that something new was about to arrive. Jack had barely slept, tossing and turning with thoughts of fences that needed mending and fields that begged for water. But there was another worry gnawing at him now. Emma and Sophie had been whispering about a plan for days, and he wasn't entirely sure he was ready for it. By mid-morning, the girls were ready to reveal their surprise. Jack was in the barn, checking on a tired old mare, when he heard the crunch of tires on gravel again. He wiped his hands on his overalls and walked outside, squinting in the sunlight. A small battered trailer was parked near the driveway, and behind it stood a woman from the local animal shelter, smiling nervously. Between them was a horse, small, wiry, and clearly worn from hardship. Its coat was dull and dusty, and one of its legs bore a healed but noticeable scar. Despite all that, its eyes shone with a strange intensity, a quiet courage that made Jack's heart twist. "Dad," Emma said softly, "we found him at the shelter. They said he was a survivor. He's been through a lot, but he's strong. We thought maybe he could help the ranch. Maybe he could help us too." Jack blinked, unsure how to respond. He had always been a man of logic, of practicality. A new horse might mean more work, more worry, and right now, he didn't know if he had the strength to give either. But when he looked at Dusty, the horse's name, Emma explained, he saw more than an animal. He saw determination, a spirit that refused to be broken, and for some reason that stirred something deep inside him. Sophie stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "Please, Dad, just give him a chance. We can take care of him together. You taught us how to care for the animals. We can do it." Jack exhaled slowly. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to say no. But the earnest hope in his daughter's eyes, combined with the horse's steady gaze, made his words stick in his throat. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's give him a try." The next hour was a mixture of chaos and wonder. Dusty was skittish, moving cautiously as they led him from the trailer into the barn. Every unfamiliar sound made him start, and he flinched at the creak of the barn door. Jack found himself holding his breath each time Dusty shifted nervously, worrying the horse might bolt or stumble. Emma and Sophie were gentle, speaking in low, soothing tones, their hands brushing Dusty's rough coat, letting him know he was safe. Slowly, the horse began to relax, nuzzling Sophie's shoulder as if acknowledging that he was finally home. Jack watched them with a strange mix of awe and humility. He had raised his daughters to be strong, independent, and compassionate. But seeing them care for this fragile, broken creature stirred something inside him he hadn't felt in years. It reminded him of Margaret, her patience, her ability to see the value in every living thing, no matter how small or scarred. He realized then that this horse was more than an animal. He was a symbol of hope, a chance for the family to heal together. Over the next few days, caring for Dusty became a lesson in patience and persistence. Jack and the girls took turns cleaning his wounds, feeding him soft hay, and walking him slowly around the paddock to build his confidence. Dusty was stubborn at times, refusing to eat or to follow instructions, but he never gave up entirely. And neither did Jack or the girls. They learned to read his moods, to understand his quiet signals, and to respond with gentle firmness. In many ways, the horse taught them about resilience, about the quiet strength that comes from enduring hardship. Jack found himself waking earlier than usual, eager to check on Dusty before the sun rose. He walked through the fields in the cool morning air, letting the soft light illuminate the way, watching as the horse moved slowly, deliberately, as if measuring each step. He realized that Dusty's struggle mirrored the ranch itself. Both had been beaten down by time and circumstance. Both had scars that were visible and invisible. But both were still standing, and that thought sparked a determination in Jack that had been dormant for too long. Emma and Sophie joined him each morning, bringing laughter and energy that seemed to chase away some of the heaviness that had settled over the ranch. They talked about plans for the land, ideas for reviving old pastures, and ways to strengthen the fences. Jack listened, occasionally offering advice, sometimes shaking his head at their youthful optimism. But deep down, he began to feel a cautious hope. Perhaps the ranch could be saved. Perhaps they could all heal together. The community began to take notice as well. Neighbors passing by would stop to watch the horse, commenting on his bravery and the care the family was giving him. One morning, an elderly rancher named Mr. Jenkins approached, leaning on his cane, his eyes twinkling. "You've got yourself a fighter there," he said, nodding toward Dusty. "Takes a lot to survive what he's been through. Looks like he found the right family to land with." Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I think he has," he replied quietly. And in that moment he realized something profound. Dusty wasn't just a survivor because of his own strength. He was surviving because someone cared, because love and attention could mend even the deepest wounds. As the weeks went on, Dusty began to transform. His coat grew shinier, his muscles stronger, and his movements more confident. He still bore the scars of his past, but they no longer defined him. Jack watched as Dusty ran freely across the field one morning, the sunlight catching his coat, and felt a lump in his throat. This horse, once so broken, was thriving, and it reminded him that the ranch, too, could thrive if they put in the work and the care. Evenings became a special time for the family. After the work was done, they would sit on the porch or near the barn, sipping coffee or sharing simple meals, talking about their hopes, dreams, and the small victories of the day. Dusty would often nuzzle close to them, as if joining the conversation in his own quiet way. Jack realized that these moments of connection were just as important as the physical labor of running a ranch. They reminded him why he had chosen this life, why he had fought to keep the ranch alive even when it seemed hopeless. One particularly quiet evening, Jack found himself alone in the barn, brushing Dusty's mane under the warm glow of the hanging lanterns. The horse stood patiently, leaning into the strokes of Jack's hands, trusting him completely. Jack felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He whispered softly to Dusty, telling him about the ranch, about the family, and about the hopes he held deep inside. It was a simple, quiet moment, but it carried a weight of healing that neither man nor horse could have predicted. Emma and Sophie watched from the doorway, smiling at the sight of their father finally opening his heart again. They had hoped Dusty would bring a change, but even they were surprised at how profoundly it was affecting Jack. He laughed more, talked more, and began to see possibilities instead of just problems. The ranch, once a place of despair, was slowly transforming into a place of hope, all because of a scrappy, brave horse who refused to give up. As the days turned into weeks, the ranch began to show signs of life once more. The fences were repaired, the fields were planted, and the remaining cattle seemed healthier under the careful attention of the family. Jack realized that caring for Dusty had taught him something essential. Survival wasn't just about enduring, it was about growing, adapting, and finding strength in the support of others. And for the first time in a long time, he felt confident that the ranch and the family could survive and thrive together. By the end of the month, Dusty had become more than just a horse. He was a symbol of resilience, a living reminder that even the most broken beings could find a way to heal and flourish with love, patience, and determination. Jack looked out over the fields one evening, Emma and Sophie by his side, and felt a spark of optimism he hadn't felt in years. Perhaps the ranch wasn't lost. Perhaps the family wasn't broken. Perhaps together they could turn this struggling land into a place of life, love, and second chances. And so, with Dusty grazing peacefully nearby, Jack Thompson, once burdened by grief and worry, began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. The ranch was still a work in progress, still scarred by loss and neglect, but hope had arrived in an unexpected form. Through the trust of a horse and the love of his daughters, Jack realized that no matter how difficult the past had been, the future still held the promise of healing and new beginnings. Spring had begun to settle over the Thompson ranch, bringing with it a gentle warmth that softened the edges of the dry, cracked earth. Jack Thompson woke before sunrise, as he had begun to do over the past few weeks. The quiet of the early morning had become a kind of sanctuary for him, a time to plan, work, and reflect without the distractions of the world. Today, he would check the newly repaired fences and make sure the irrigation lines were running smoothly. But before that, his eyes went immediately to Dusty, who was standing near the barn, nostrils flaring as he breathed in the crisp morning air. Jack smiled. The horse had grown stronger and more confident with each passing day. His coat shone in the morning light, his muscles moving fluidly as he trotted across the field. Dusty's progress was remarkable, and Jack couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. But the best part was the way Dusty had begun to bond with the family. He no longer flinched at sudden noises or shied away from touch. Instead, he approached them willingly, seeking the gentle words and steady hands that had become a source of comfort for him. Emma and Sophie arrived soon after, carrying their usual energy and chatter. The girls had begun to take more responsibility for the ranch, their visits stretching into longer stays. They had made lists, repaired gates, and even planted some seeds in the small garden near the farmhouse. The ranch was slowly coming back to life, not just physically, but in spirit. "Morning, Dad," Emma said, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she surveyed the field. "Dusty's ready for his morning walk." Jack nodded. "All right, let's see how he does today." He grabbed the lead rope, feeling the horse's warmth and steady weight against his hand. Together, the three of them walked Dusty around the paddock, giving him time to stretch and explore. The horse moved confidently now, his steps sure and even, his eyes alert but calm. Jack felt a sense of connection that went beyond words, a silent understanding that they were working together, healing together. After the walk, they fed Dusty and cleaned his stall. The routine, though simple, had a profound effect on Jack. Each small task, whether brushing away dirt or mending a fence, was a reminder that progress came in steady, persistent steps. Dusty, once a symbol of struggle, had become a teacher, showing Jack and his daughters that patience, care, and love could produce remarkable results. In the following weeks, Jack began applying the lessons he had learned from Dusty to other areas of the ranch. He repaired broken fences with greater confidence, organized the remaining cattle into healthier pastures, and even started experimenting with small patches of new crops. The land responded to his efforts, tiny green shoots emerging from the soil where nothing had grown for months. Each success, no matter how small, brought hope and a sense of achievement that Jack had not felt in years. Emma and Sophie thrived alongside him. Emma's practical mind helped her father organize tasks efficiently, while Sophie's gentle touch ensured the animals were cared for with love. Together, they began to create a rhythm that resembled the way the ranch had once functioned. Dusty was at the center of it all, a living reminder that resilience and care could bring life back to even the most broken places. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Jack stood at the edge of the main pasture, watching Dusty graze. The horse lifted his head and trotted toward Jack, ears flicking attentively. "Good boy," Jack whispered, scratching behind Dusty's ears. He felt a swell of emotion he couldn't quite name, a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. Dusty had taught him to trust again, to hope again, and to see the possibilities that lay hidden beneath layers of grief and struggle. The girls joined him shortly after, carrying baskets filled with fresh vegetables from their small garden. They laughed as they talked about planting ideas and ways to improve the ranch further. Jack listened, occasionally offering advice, but mostly absorbing their energy and optimism. He realized that this was what he had been missing, the shared effort, the connection, the sense of family working together toward a common goal. Evenings became a time of reflection and connection. The three of them would sit on the porch or in the barn, talking about the day's work, sharing stories, and laughing at small misadventures. Dusty often lingered nearby, resting his head on Jack's shoulder or nuzzling the girls affectionately. These moments, simple yet profound, became the heart of the ranch. They reminded Jack that success was not just measured by crops or fences, but by the bonds forged and the love shared. One particularly warm evening, Jack found himself talking to Dusty as he brushed his mane. "You've changed everything, old friend," he whispered. "Not just the ranch, but me too." Dusty blinked calmly, as if understanding every word. Jack chuckled softly. "I guess we're teaching each other." "Huh?" He realized that Dusty's presence had rekindled something within him, a sense of purpose, a willingness to face challenges, and a belief that even broken things could heal. As spring moved into early summer, the ranch began to show clear signs of revival. The fields were greener, the fences sturdier, and the remaining livestock healthier than they had been in years. Neighbors passing by started to comment on the change, noticing the renewed life and energy on the property. One morning, Mr. Jenkins, the elderly rancher, stopped by with a grin. "I haven't seen this place looking so good in a long time," he said. "Looks like you've found your rhythm again." Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It's not just me," he said. "It's the girls, and Dusty. He's done more for this place than I ever thought possible." Emma laughed. "I think Dusty deserves a medal." Sophie rolled her eyes playfully, or at least a really good carrot. The simple humor, the shared laughter, and the sense of achievement brought Jack a profound sense of peace. For the first time in years, he could see a future for the ranch, a future filled not with worry and loss, but with possibility and hope. Dusty had not only survived his past, but had inspired the family to survive theirs and to grow stronger together. Work continued, but the family's approach had changed. No longer were they burdened solely by the weight of the past. Instead, they moved with intention and care, treating every challenge as an opportunity. Dusty, ever patient and resilient, guided them in ways both subtle and profound. His trust and courage became a mirror for the family, reflecting back the strength they had almost forgotten they possessed. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Jack walked the fields with Emma and Sophie by his side. The air was warm, carrying the scent of fresh grass and soil. Dusty trotted alongside them, his presence steady and comforting. Jack looked at the land, at the fence lines they had repaired, at the young shoots sprouting from the earth, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. The ranch was no longer dying. It was alive, vibrant, and full of promise. Sophie paused and glanced at her father. "You know, Dad," she said softly, "I think this place was waiting for Dusty and for us. We needed each other." Jack nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "I think you're right," he said. We all needed each other more than we realized. As they walked back toward the barn, the golden light of the sunset stretched across the fields, casting long shadows and highlighting the renewed life of the ranch. Dusty galloped ahead briefly, then returned to walk beside them, a silent testament to survival, hope, and the power of care. Jack realized that the ranch's revival was about more than just repairs and planting. It was about connection, trust, and the belief that even in the face of hardship, growth was possible. By the time night fell, the family sat on the porch, the sky painted in deep shades of blue and sprinkled with stars. The day had been long, filled with work, laughter, and quiet reflection. Jack felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a feeling he had not known for years. Dusty rested nearby, his breathing calm, and the ranch seemed to hum with life once more. The family had faced the challenges of the past and, with patience, courage, and love, had begun to turn the tide. Jack Thompson, once a man burdened by loss and uncertainty, now felt a quiet strength that came from resilience and hope. The ranch, like Dusty and the family, was learning to heal, and for the first time in a long time, Jack could imagine a future where the land flourished, the animals thrived, and his family found joy and purpose together. Spring had brought more than just warmer days. It had brought renewal, connection, and a reminder that even in the hardest times, life had a way of recovering. With Dusty at the heart of their journey, the Thompsons had discovered that hope was not something distant or abstract. It was alive, breathing, and growing alongside them. And together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, stronger and more united than ever. The summer sun rose slowly over the Thompson ranch, casting a golden glow across the fields. Jack Thompson had long ago stopped dreading the morning chores. Now he greeted the day with quiet determination. The land was no longer a place of despair. It hummed with a sense of possibility. The fences were sturdy, the pastures were green, and Dusty moved with confident strength across the fields, his presence a constant reminder of resilience and hope. As Jack worked alongside his daughters, he began to notice something new. The neighborhood was watching. Word of Dusty's transformation and the Thompsons' dedication had spread through the small community. Neighbors began to stop by more frequently, not just to admire the horse, but to offer their help. It started with simple gestures, a bag of feed left at the barn, a suggestion for a better irrigation technique, but soon more hands were joining the work. One morning, Mr. Jenkins, the elderly rancher who lived down the road, arrived early, leaning on his cane but walking with surprising energy. "I heard you've been turning things around here," he said with a grin. "Figured I'd come see for myself." He nodded toward Dusty, who raised his head and watched the man cautiously. "Looks like that horse's spirit is rubbing off on everyone." Jack smiled, shaking Mr. Jenkins's hand. "You're welcome to stay and help. There's always more to do." Mr. Jenkins chuckled. "Don't mind if I do." He spent the day helping repair a broken fence and showing Jack a few tricks for managing the irrigation. With every passing hour, Jack realized that he had spent too long trying to shoulder the ranch alone. There was strength in community, in sharing burdens, and in learning from others who had walked the same paths. Emma and Sophie thrived in this new rhythm. Emma loved organizing the projects, making lists, and assigning tasks, while Sophie moved gently among the animals, brushing coats and calming nervous creatures. Dusty had become their inspiration, a living example of how care, patience, and determination could overcome adversity. The horse's quiet courage seemed to infuse everyone around him, spreading optimism that was hard to ignore. Soon, other neighbors joined in small ways. One family brought a trailer full of hay when the supply ran low. Another neighbor offered to help repaint the barn. Even children from nearby homes stopped by, fascinated by Dusty and eager to lend a hand. Jack watched all of this with quiet wonder. He had always valued independence and hard work, but he realized now that connection, collaboration, and trust could accomplish more than he had ever imagined. As the days passed, the ranch began to take on a new life. The fields that had been dry and barren were now sprouting with crops. The fences stood tall and secure, and the animals were healthy and calm. Jack noticed that he laughed more freely, that his shoulders were less tense, and that a sense of purpose had returned to his life. Dusty, for all his quiet presence, had done more than heal himself. He had healed the family, the ranch, and even the small community that surrounded them. One afternoon, a group of local children arrived, curious and wide-eyed. "Can we help?" one of them asked, holding a small watering can. Sophie knelt beside them, showing them how to water the plants gently. Emma organized a small group to repair a fence, while Jack led Dusty through a gentle exercise in the field. Watching the scene unfold, Jack felt a profound sense of pride. This ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a place of learning, care, and connection. Evenings were no longer quiet and heavy with worry. The family would sit together on the porch, sipping iced tea, sharing stories, and watching Dusty graze nearby. Sometimes neighbors would join them, bringing fresh-baked bread or simply sharing conversation. Jack realized that these moments of connection were just as important as the physical work on the ranch. They brought joy, perspective, and a sense of belonging that he had not felt in years. One evening, as the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, Jack found himself reflecting on the transformation that had taken place. The ranch, once struggling to survive, was thriving in small but meaningful ways. Dusty had become more than a horse. He was a symbol of resilience and hope, and the community, drawn together by shared effort and compassion, had reminded Jack that no one was meant to face challenges alone. Emma looked up from her notebook, where she was jotting down plans for a new garden plot. "Dad, I think the ranch could be even better if we start planting some flowers near the barn," she said. "It'll make it feel more welcoming, and Dusty might like the shade, too." Sophie laughed softly. "And maybe we can build a small path for visitors, so people can come see Dusty without disturbing the animals." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "I like both ideas. Let's plan it for next week. It's time we start thinking about the ranch as a place for more than just survival." The following days were filled with busy, fulfilling work. They dug flower beds, laid stones for a path, and painted the barn in warm, cheerful colors. Dusty watched patiently, sometimes wandering near to investigate, always careful and calm. Jack marveled at how the horse had adjusted to every change, never complaining, always trusting. In many ways, Dusty had taught the family the importance of patience, consistency, and gentle guidance. Word of the ranch's transformation continued to spread. Families from nearby towns began visiting, drawn by stories of a horse that had survived against the odds and a family that had come together to care for him. Jack found himself welcoming guests, showing them around and sharing lessons learned from Dusty. The ranch was no longer a private struggle. It had become a place of inspiration, a small sanctuary where hope and care could flourish. Jack also noticed a subtle change in himself. He was no longer as stubbornly solitary as he had once been. He asked for advice, welcomed help, and even shared laughter freely with neighbors and friends. The ranch had become a community project in a way he had never anticipated, and he was grateful for it. Dusty had not only brought hope to the land, but he had brought people together in a shared mission. One evening, as they sat around a small fire in the backyard, Jack found himself talking quietly to Emma and Sophie. "You girls were right," he said softly. "Bringing Dusty here, it wasn't just about helping him. It was about helping all of us, me, the ranch, and even the neighbors. He changed everything." Emma smiled, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "We knew he was special, Dad. We just hoped you'd see it too." Sophie nodded. "And we needed him as much as he needed us. Sometimes, hope comes in ways you don't expect." Jack felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of gratitude and love that made him blink back tears. He realized that the ranch's revival was not simply about work, crops, or fences. It was about relationships, between father and daughters, between humans and animals, and between the family and the community that had chosen to stand by them. Over the next few weeks, the ranch settled into a rhythm that balanced work and joy. Dusty became a beloved figure, not just for the family, but for everyone who visited. Children learned to care for him, neighbors shared their expertise, and the Thompsons found themselves surrounded by a network of support they had never known. Jack, once weighed down by grief and isolation, now felt the power of connection in a profound way. One bright morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Jack stood at the edge of the pasture, watching Dusty gallop freely across the field. The horse's movements were fluid, confident, and unafraid, a stark contrast to the timid, scarred animal that had arrived months before. Jack felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Dusty had survived, the ranch had survived, and the family had survived. Together, they had transformed hardship into hope, struggle into growth, and despair into joy. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner on the porch, laughter and conversation filling the warm summer air, Jack realized something essential. The ranch was no longer just land and buildings. It was a living, breathing testament to resilience, love, and community. And Dusty, the little survivor horse who had captured their hearts, had been the spark that ignited it all. Jack Thompson, once a man burdened by loss, now felt a renewed sense of purpose. The ranch, the family, and the community were intertwined in ways he had never imagined. Together, they had created something more than a thriving farm. They had created a place of hope, healing, and connection. And for Jack, the most profound lesson of all was simple. When hearts come together with patience, care, and determination, even the most broken things can flourish. Summer had settled fully over the Thompson Ranch, and the air was warm, filled with the sweet scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers. The land that had once struggled to survive now thrived under the care of Jack Thompson and his daughters. The fences stood tall and strong, pastures were lush and green, and the animals were healthy, calm, and full of life. Dusty, the horse that had arrived months earlier, broken and timid, now moved with confident grace across the fields, a living symbol of resilience and hope. Jack walked along the main path with Emma and Sophie at his side. The three of them had formed a rhythm of work and joy that felt natural, almost effortless. They checked the crops, inspected the fences, and cared for the animals together, laughing and talking as they went. Dusty followed closely, occasionally breaking into a trot before returning to walk beside them. The horse had become more than a companion. He was a part of the family, a teacher, and an inspiration all at once. "It's amazing how far we've come," Emma said, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she looked across the fields. "I can hardly believe what the ranch looked like just a few months ago." Sophie nodded, smiling as she watched Dusty graze near the garden. "And it's all because we worked together, and because we believed it could get better." Jack smiled, feeling a swell of pride and gratitude. "You girls are right," he said, "but it's more than just work. It's hope, patience, and trust. Dusty taught us all that." The family spent the morning tending to the animals, Dusty moving calmly among them as if overseeing their care. Jack noticed how confident and steady the horse had become. His scars were still visible, reminders of a difficult past, but they no longer defined him. Dusty's strength and courage had rubbed off on the entire ranch. Where once there had been doubt and worry, now there was determination and joy. As the day progressed, neighbors began to visit again, curious to see the transformation for themselves. Families brought supplies, offered advice, and sometimes simply enjoyed the chance to spend time at the ranch. Jack welcomed them warmly, showing them the new flower beds, the repaired fences, and, of course, Dusty. The horse had become a local hero of sorts, drawing people in with his gentle presence and his remarkable story of survival. One afternoon, a group of children arrived, excited to help feed the animals and learn about the ranch. Sophie led them carefully through the tasks, teaching them how to handle the animals gently and respectfully. Emma guided them on planting seeds and watering the garden. Jack watched with pride, realizing that the ranch had become more than a home or a place of work. It had become a place of learning, joy, and inspiration for others. In the quiet moments, Jack would often reflect on how much had changed. He thought about the weeks of struggle, the moments of doubt, and the heavy weight of grief that had once made him feel alone and defeated. Now, the ranch thrived not because of luck, but because of care, effort, and connection. Dusty had been the catalyst for this change, but the true strength had come from the family's commitment to one another and to the land they loved. One evening, as the sun began to dip behind the hills, Jack, Emma, and Sophie gathered on the porch with Dusty resting nearby. The sky was painted in shades of gold, pink, and orange, reflecting the warmth and life that had returned to the ranch. Jack felt a deep sense of contentment he had not known in years. "Do you remember when we first brought Dusty here?" Emma asked softly. "I was worried he might not make it, or that we wouldn't be able to handle him." Sophie laughed. "I was worried too. He was so scared, and I wasn't sure we could earn his trust, but look at him now. He's brave and strong, just like us." Jack nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "He's more than brave," he said. "He's taught us all about hope, patience, and the importance of never giving up. And he's reminded me that we don't have to face life's challenges alone." As they watched the sun set, Dusty lifted his head, his eyes shining in the fading light. He moved gracefully toward them, nuzzling Jack's shoulder gently. The simple gesture carried a weight of trust and affection that made Jack's heart swell. He realized that the horse had not only survived his own hardships, but had given the family the courage to face theirs. The transformation of the ranch was more than physical. It was emotional and spiritual as well. Jack felt lighter, happier, and more connected than he had in years. He spent his mornings tending the land, his afternoons repairing fences and guiding the cattle, and his evenings enjoying time with his daughters and Dusty. Every day carried a sense of purpose, and every small success reinforced the knowledge that their efforts mattered. The community continued to play a vital role in the ranch's revival. Neighbors stopped by to offer advice, lend tools, or simply share stories of their own experiences. Jack realized that asking for help was not a weakness, but a strength. The ranch had grown not just because of individual effort, but because of the support, wisdom, and care of those around them. Dusty had become a bridge, connecting the family with the wider community in a way that enriched everyone's lives. One particularly bright morning, Jack led Dusty to a small paddock near the edge of the property. "Time for a little exercise," he said, smiling. Dusty moved eagerly, stretching his legs and trotting around the field. Jack noticed the way the horse carried himself now, proud, confident, and full of life. It was a stark contrast to the timid, scarred animal that had arrived months ago. Jack felt a sense of awe and gratitude. Dusty had not only survived, but had thrived, and in doing so, had inspired everyone around him. As summer progressed, the ranch became a place of celebration and joy. Flowers bloomed in bright colors around the barn, crops flourished, and Dusty became a symbol of resilience and courage for everyone who visited. Families came to learn, children laughed as they helped care for the animals, and Jack found himself sharing stories of perseverance and hope. The ranch was no longer simply a place of work. It was a sanctuary of life, love, and inspiration. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, Jack sat on the porch with Emma and Sophie. The gentle sound of crickets filled the air, and Dusty rested nearby, calm and content. Jack reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The ranch that had once teetered on the edge of despair now thrived, full of energy, life, and connection. He realized that this revival was not just about repairing fences or planting crops. It was about healing, hope, and the strength that comes from love and community. "Dad," Emma said softly, "I think the ranch is finally where it's meant to be, and it's all because we worked together. And because Dusty showed us how to keep going even when things were hard." Sophie nodded in agreement. "It's more than just the land or the animals. It's the family, the friends, and the trust we've built. That's what makes it strong." Jack smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "You girls are right. This place, this ranch, it's alive again. Not because of luck, not because of chance, but because we cared, because we never gave up, and because we believed in each other." Dusty moved closer, nuzzling Jack's hand as if to affirm the truth of his words. Jack laughed softly, a sound full of relief and happiness. "We did it, old friend," he whispered. "We really did it." The ranch, once a symbol of struggle and loss, had become a place of hope and renewal. Dusty, the little survivor who had captured their hearts, had inspired a transformation that went far beyond physical repairs. He had taught the family about courage, resilience, and the power of love. And in return, the Thompsons had given him a home, safety, and the care he deserved. Jack knew that challenges would continue to come. They always did, but he no longer feared them. With his daughters by his side and Dusty nearby, he felt ready to face whatever the future held. The ranch had survived. The family had grown stronger, and hope had taken root in a way that would endure for years to come. As the night settled over the fields and the stars twinkled overhead, Jack Thompson stood quietly, looking out over the land he loved. Dusty grazed nearby, Emma and Sophie sat close, and the ranch thrummed with life. For the first time in years, Jack felt a deep, abiding peace. He realized that survival was not enough. True living required connection, care, and the courage to embrace hope. And in that moment, surrounded by his daughters and their brave, inspiring horse, Jack knew that the future was bright, full of possibility, and alive with love. The ranch was no longer just a place of struggle. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a testament to resilience. Dusty had survived, the family had thrived, and together, they had created a story of hope, courage, and unwavering love. A story that would endure long after the sun had set and the stars had faded.